Go. Well, welcome. Does it feel like the end? No? Okay, but we have to be excited that it's the end. Yeah. Yes. Yes. You're right. It is a strange feeling. And maybe it's because of how the past year has gone and all that stuff, year and a half perhaps is gone. So, but the end is definitely here. It's near. It's there. So today's the last day for in-person learning. So here we go. Any good Memorial Day highlights? Weekend highlights that we can talk about? Did some kayaking, repaired the deck. I tried not to curse the previous owner of the house and their craftsmanship on how to put a deck together. Took a little bit longer to fix than I anticipated. So there, that's mine. Handiwork and do some kayaking was my big stuff for the weekend.
Where'd you go kayaking?
Went up to Square Lake again. So the nice thing about Square Lake is they have a no wake on the lake until like noon, and it's not really a fisherman's lake. It's more for watercraft, I guess, and it's a small lake anyhow. So if you ever been up to Square Lake, you'd know that it's not the biggest lake, and it takes about an hour to kayak around it if you take your time, all that stuff. But it's a nice one. So there we go. So again, hopefully you had a good weekend. Hopefully you put some sunscreen on, all that stuff, and didn't get too burnt unless that's your goal. So you can create a good base, all that. All right. So realistically for us today is, let's just put some closure to IB 20th Century World History. And if you have not, and I know there's a few of you who haven't, but today is the day in which you need to get that last assessment taken care of. So you want to do that. And I have it closing at 2 because I need to crunch any of the assignments and the grades. And so we can have all that stuff taken care of. So because tomorrow is when you pick up your graduation stuff, right? And you turn your iPad, all that stuff. So there you go. So hopefully anything that you have in your Google Drive that is of importance, hopefully you transferred all that stuff too. So if you have like a private Gmail account or an email or someplace that you can, there's anything that you need to store, anything you need to have. And if you perhaps gave your apps account to your college or to your recruiter, whatever it might be, I want to make sure that you change that email, all that stuff too. All right. So there we go. We got that. And deadlines for anything missing. Let's take care of that piece. Oh, got excited. Here we go. All right. So what I want to do is I'll take probably about 10, 15 minutes. And then after that, I'll cut you loose to work on anything that you may have for this class or for any other class if you have. But I want to put closure to the Cold War. The Cold War comes to an end with the collapse of the Soviet Union as we have been looking at. And this video clip that I have is just kind of going back and reflecting on the Cold War itself from the beginning to its end, and try to put some meaning to it. Okay, so let me see if I can forward this here. Let's see here. There we go. All right. So we put some. So let's take back here and see what they say about the Cold War.
Turned their tanks around.
Главное, на что ушло, наверное, половина времени, каким быть союзу.
At Minsk, on December the 8th, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, the three Slav states, acted to dissolve the Soviet Union and set up instead a commonwealth of independent states. The Soviet Union was finished, and so was Mikhail Gorbachev. They told George Bush before telling Gorbachev what they'd done.
It's disgraceful to tell the President of the United States and not bother to inform the President of your own country. It's shameful. Absolutely contemptible. It's dirty.
For 45 years, the world feared a nuclear apocalypse. It never came. Statesmen on both sides who had the power to push the nuclear button in crisis after crisis put humanity's interest first. Nuclear deterrence kept the peace.
The world is a far safer place now that the Cold War is over. No leader of a small country is worrying and saying to his cabinet, one of these two crazy superpowers is going to get us caught up in a nuclear war. That is not going to happen.
Those of us who experienced what I would call the fever of the Cold War, the permanent state of alarm about the prospect of a nuclear war, we breathe more easily now. We no longer have to carry this heavy burden.
The Cold War ended peaceably, but need it have begun? Could it all have been avoided when East and West were comrades back in 1945?
We missed our chance because there were so many suspicions on both sides. The West exaggerated the strength of the Soviet Union. We could not possibly have moved into Europe. We were a devastated country. We'd lost millions of people.
I can't imagine any circumstances under which we could have gotten along with Uncle Joe Stalin. I can imagine no circumstances under which we could have worked out our problems with Russia earlier than we did, or in a different way. I've come to the conclusion we did it pretty goddamn well.
Millions who might have died in nuclear conflict lived and prospered. But there were costs, human and material, and a price to pay. The manufacture and testing of nuclear weapons left a continuing mark.
The legacy of the Cold War really means that the Cold War is still going on. It's going on because the air, water, and soil are polluted. It's very expensive and difficult to overcome this legacy. It's really a delayed action time bomb.
During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union between them spent trillions of dollars on armaments. The United States, borrowing heavily, could afford it. The Soviet Union, in the end, could not. Part of that vast cost was necessary to maintain the balance on which world peace depended. Some of it was wasted. There were shooting wars within the Cold War. They took their toll. In Korea, millions died. And millions in Vietnam, soldiers and civilians. Over 1 million died in Afghanistan. Hundreds of thousands died in Africa and in Central America. Some of these wars would have happened anyway. The Cold War made them more deadly. Thousands died in a divided Europe. $200 at the Berlin Wall. The living mourn the dead.
Неправда. И камни говорят даже. Я прихожу сюда на могилу сына и только облегчаю здесь свою боль. Могу успокоиться, поговорить с ним, посоветоваться.
And look, he's right here, where my lips can reach him. He isn't up high where I can't reach him or down low where I can't bend anymore. He's right here in front of me.
The Cold War was a clash of ideologies. And the big Cold War loser was Marxism-Leninism. The communist dream of a better society that would outlast the West came to nothing. But not for Fidel Castro.
Why believe that the ideals of socialism, which are so generous and appeal so much to solidarity and fraternity, will one day disappear? What would prevail? Selfishness? Individualism? Personal ambitions? That will not save the world. Of that I'm absolutely convinced.
Communism as a system went against life, against man's fundamental needs, against the need for freedom, the need to be enterprising, to associate freely, against the will of the nation. It suppressed national identity. Something that goes against life may last a long time, but sooner or later it will collapse.
The superpowers had confronted each other relentlessly. Now, under intolerable pressure, one side withdrew. Gorbachev had done as much as anyone to end the Cold War. He called Bush and told him this was his last day in office.
There was a kind of sadness. The finality of it hit me pretty hard. It was Christmas time and holiday time. And I felt that a friend was hurt, and I wasn't happy about that.
That night, the red flag of the Soviet Union was lowered for the last time. In Washington, Bush made his Christmas broadcast.
For over 40 years, the United States led the West in the struggle against communism and the threat it posed to our most precious values. This struggle shaped the lives of all Americans. It forced all nations to live under the specter of nuclear destruction. That confrontation is now over.
it is a kind of a weird feeling that it just got over. It took down a flag, a new flag goes up, Soviet Union is no longer there, and it's like, all right, now we got to find a way to move forward and all that. And it will be a new path in which the United States and Russia, or the Commonwealth states, Commonwealth of Independent States, we're going to have to try to navigate. So some of the immediate effects is now trying to find where all the nuclear weapons are and who has access to them, and how can we restrict those who do have access in some ways to prevent nuclear proliferation take place. All right, so the Cold War, it does end, and it ended rather kind of, when you look at it, Gorbachev takes over in 1985, and then by 1992, it's done. So in about 7 years, Cold War goes away, and it's very rapid pace. And for the United States and the West, trying to kind of adjust and change policies in real time proved to be very, very difficult. A path in which we're just gonna have to try to navigate through. But we knew that an end is going to be near here, and we were hoping that that ending is going to be rather peaceful, and it does. It does prove to be peaceful in the end, to the best it can. There'll be some difficult moments in some of the countries, Eastern Bloc countries definitely, as they're transitioning away from communist to non-communist regimes. However, we find out though that in some of these countries, that even though they're not a communist regime, moving away from authoritarian regime is going to take some time. And they still are struggling with it. But you could see in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries, one could say it's not so much what the United States and the West is doing, but it's what's happening internally in some of these countries, where you got the social and the political and the economic problems. The standard of living is definitely have taken a hit here. And for the Soviet Union, they're just trying to figure out how they can keep themselves together, and they're loosening restrictions in some of those countries like the Eastern Bloc countries. And nationalism, a rise of nationalism is happening. And we can definitely look at maybe some of these policies that Gorbachev is trying to initiate is just not hitting the target fast enough. And so in the end, the Soviet Union is going to collapse, and communism goes in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union. Now, communism is going to remain, and still does remain in some parts of the world today. When we think about that one American diplomat, or someone that worked for the State Department, said that we have done a pretty good job in our approach to the Cold War, to Joseph Stalin. That is always up to, if we use historiography, it's up to debate whether or not we had done a good job in our approach here. But context of the time period, and seeing how it started in 1945, definitely, as Mikhail Gorbachev had said, that there was a lot of distrust for each other, and some events happened that accelerated and created that foundation for the Cold War. And as it progressed, we know policies and personalities all played a part here. The one guy, the Soviet environmentalist, had said that we are still feeling the effects. This series, it came out in the 90s. But one could say we still are feeling the effects today. There was a story that came out last year about a military base that we had in Greenland. And, Greenland had always been this very frozen place, but with climate change things are warming up. And so this military base that we had in Greenland was a place that we had also stored a lot of toxic nuclear waste. And we thought, well, it's going to stay frozen forever, that it won't be a problem. But because Greenland is warming up, we might have to go back to Greenland and clean up a potential nuclear toxic waste problem. So these are things that we may find out about the Cold War, the lingering effects of this Cold War in some of our decisions. All right. Any thoughts on the conclusion of the Cold War? Do we have that fear? Do we have that fear of nuclear disaster today? Do you feel it? I don't know if we do. I don't know if we do. And where Edward Shevardnadze had talked about this kind of like this virus or this nuclear fever, Cold War fever. You know, that's an interesting way of describing it, but that was always in the back of your mind. Is this event going to be the one that's going to become bigger and cause it to happen? And you know, when they publish in newspapers and in magazines periodically about nuclear weapons and the detonation of it, it brought it home. Like, okay, it's a possibility there. But we still moved on in the back of our mind. Yes, we still have this potential of a nuclear catastrophe, but we still try to find a way to persevere and move on, and which we did. All right. So with that, you have the next 50 minutes here. And I know many of you have the stuff, taken the Cold War assessment, but if you haven't, let's do that, take care of that. Or if you got any missing work, here's your opportunity to kind of maybe improve the grade a little bit more here by turning some of that missing work in. That'd be fantastic. And I know I've got some VLA people at home. So before I cut you loose, though, I know it's 50 minutes left before class gets out, though. I just want to make sure that I don't forget a big thank you for this trimester. And for some of you, you've been with me for in theory, 6 trimesters, 2 years, which is impressive feat. I think there's a few in here that are definitely that, and you should almost like get a medal for that piece to put up with Mr. Newcomb for 2 years. That's huge. But again, I thank you for taking the risk, take this class, 2-year class, all that, and your patience through our trying time here. So I want to make sure I say that as well. Okay. So with that, I'll cut you loose. Those at home, use this time to get caught up, and a big thank you to you as well. All right. 2 o'clock is our deadline.